You're listening to the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast with Chicago attorney Dave Scriven-Young. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor, which is the app that I use to record and edit the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, so let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 214 of the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast for May 31st, 2020. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host. This podcast takes you on a daily journey to discover key principles in the areas of marketing, sales, and leadership for attorneys. So we're at the end of May, and many businesses are going through phased reopenings throughout this quarantine. And I want you to think about, as we go into June, and just take stock, because we've gone through many episodes here and we've gone through a lot in our lives, and I want you just to get some perspective as to how the last couple of months have been. Did you gain any new skills? Did what happened during that time? Whatever happened, I want you just to take some perspective and just think about the fact that we all survived. It doesn't matter right now if you learn something new. It doesn't matter if you feel like you've wasted the last couple of months. What matters is that you're safe, hopefully you're healthy, and we've all gotten through this together. And now what we need to do is start planning for this upcoming week. We need to start planning for this upcoming month and for the next 3 months to really, now that we've got through this period of quarantine, what are we going to do next? So one of the things that I've been encouraging people to do, especially young attorneys, is to continue to build their trustworthiness within the firm, because one of the things that partners look at when giving out work, is to think about, well, who is the most trustworthy person? Who's the person that's going to get it done, that's going to get it done well, and I can give this to without, and I'll know that there won't be much problem with it. And so that's how, and I wrote an article recently for the ABA about, essentially in quarantine, how to get work. And I talked a lot about, very tactical strategies on what to do when you're on phone calls, and, how to make sure that you're available for work, when partners give it out, especially in a remote location. If you're interested in that article, just let me know. I can send it to you. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about, no matter if you're in a remote situation, remote working from home situation, or if you're actually in the office, is you have to be trustworthy. And so that's where we're going with this, with today's episode, where Dr. John Maxwell in his book Leadershift is basically taking us from having a directing communication style to a connecting communication style. And step number 4 is trustworthiness, to be someone that others can count on. So I think this applies for, as I said, young attorneys who are trying to get work, but also for more experienced attorneys who want to be seen as a leader. You also have to remain trustworthy, because just like the young associate wants the partner to rely or be seen as being reliable, on the other hand, the leader, the more experienced lawyer, wants to be seen as reliable as well, because that's one way to keep clients. It's one way to keep people as employees, as associates at your firm, is to be someone who is trustworthy, because no one wants to work with or for someone who is not trustworthy. So Dr. Maxwell talks about two ways to have trustworthiness, to be that person that others can count on. Number one is, he talks about just keeping your motives right. So your motive is to add value to people and to help them. Then all is good. But there are some ways that all of us get off track, and so three areas to be seen as someone who's and to be someone who's trustworthy is number one, have integrity in your life. So somebody who your word is your bond, that you're going to do what you say, and that you are someone that you're not going to lie, you're not going to play in that gray area. You're going to be someone who tells the truth and acts with trustworthiness. It was interesting. I read an article recently about quotations in a brief, and it seems like such a small thing, but it talked about how even clerks and judges want to make sure that your quotations are correct in a brief, and even to the small detail as making brackets when you're changing the quote a little bit, or using ellipses appropriately. You have to make sure that everyone sees your work as being trustworthy, because otherwise, a judge, law clerk, they won't buy your arguments if they think that you're trying to pull one over on them. So having integrity in every aspect of your life is extremely important. Number two, consistency in your actions. So that goes in terms of, what time you get into the office, what time you're available for work. Oftentimes as an attorney, especially as a younger attorney, it's hard to have a lot of consistency and because a lot of what you do is outside of your control. So, like an end time for work was always a problem for me when I was in the office, because I never knew. I wanted to be available for the managing partner of my firm, who gives me a lot of work. I want to be available for my clients, and so having a stop time for your work that's reasonable, but yet remains available, that's hard, because a lot of people, if you stop at 5, people will be like, well, you're not working hard enough. But if you work until 6:37, that might even be too late for people. So trying to find that balance between the two is difficult, especially when you have a long commute. Obviously, that's not a problem these days, because we're not doing a lot of commuting, and it's something to think about. Is this a good, as you're planning for the next week and for the next month or so, how can you add that consistency into your life? One of the things that I've been thinking about is, in terms of public transportation, how exactly am I going to get to work every day once the office opens? Am I going to go in 5 days a week? Am I going to go in less than that? How am I going to set up my schedule to make sure that I'm not on the train when there are a million people there, to make sure that I remain healthy? Something to think about, something that we all will need to plan as we get into this. And the third part of being trustworthy, is to have competence in your work. That means that you do the work correctly, and that you have you show a lot of expertise when you're doing that work. So, there's obviously a lot of ways to gain competence. This is called a law of practice for a reason. That you do something over and over and over again, you get good at it, and that's true whether you're writing interrogatories, or you're doing a trial, you're examining a witness, you're taking a deposition. So practice is important, but also making sure that you know the law and you gain strategies, and that's why things like reading publications, going to CLEs, learning from webinars and podcasts are all extremely important. So what happens though when you fail in one of those areas? because you're going to fail. I fail at this all the time. And so the question is, how do you regain trust once you've lost it? So let's say you made a mistake in a brief, or you failed to be consistent where, you overslept, or, something happens. What should you do? And the one thing that you have to do is you don't hide it. You don't bury a mistake that you make, but you do what you can to make it right, and you communicate with the people that the mistake affects. So it's a very sort of simple process that Dr. Maxwell outlines, although actually doing it is hard work, because you don't want to let people know that you failed, but you do. And I'll give you an example of how this happened in my life. So number one, Dr. Maxwell says you have to fully acknowledge what you've done wrong. 2, you explain exactly what you're going to do to make things right, or to try to make things right. 3, you give the other person an opportunity to share their perspective and add anything to what I shared with them. Number 4, you do the work to fix the problem. 5, you follow up with them to confirm that the problem was fixed to their satisfaction. And so, this happened to me pretty early on, as I had started with the second firm that I was at. I got brought in to work at this firm to work on several different environmental matters, and particularly, when I got into the case, into the firm, they just throw stuff at you, and this happens anytime you're at a new firm, and they want you to jump in on these cases. Well, you just get thrown into a lot of stuff, and you don't necessarily know all the parties involved. You don't know the attorneys involved. There are lots of moving pieces that you don't necessarily know or understand. And so I wrote this brief, and we got it filed and that sort of thing. And then later on, I realized, because a deadline for response had come and gone, that I actually did not serve the main party who the motion was against with the brief. And so, not a huge deal, not a big problem, but to me it was a big deal, because I had just started at this firm. I was trying to make my colleagues understand that I'm someone who could be trusted, who does good work. And then I go and I make this mistake. I didn't, I wouldn't say it was, although I would like to blame other people, it really was my fault, because I should have made sure that all of the parties were on the service list. And so, I thought about it for a while and sort of got up my courage and went to go talk to one of the junior partners who basically oversaw these cases. And I told him what happened. I said, I realized that, that motion that I wrote actually did not get served on, party X. And, what I would really like to do is, go ahead and serve the party, let the attorney know that it was my mistake, and that just wanted to give them, some additional time to answer. And then if I had to, go on a motion to allow an extension of time because of my error. And then I apologized. But really followed this process without really knowing that it was a process, but just letting them know what happened. And it turned out being fine. The junior partner was completely understandable, appreciated my honesty. And then we just moved on from there, and it all worked out. But the point is that whether your mistakes are small or large, you have to own up to it. Then you have to not only do you have to come up with a plan to right the wrong, but then you also have to get other people to approve that, whether that's a junior or senior partner, whether that's a client. I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces when you make a mistake, even, an insurance carrier, possibly, if it's a malpractice situation. But the worst thing that you can do, sit on it, hide it, and bury it, because that's not good for anybody. It's really not good for yourself in terms of your mental health, because you're just going to think about it, and it's going to come up every day, and it's better just to take care of it than to let it fester. So For your daily action item today, I really want you to think about how you're going to, in the next week and the next month, what your plans are for sort of reopening, and how you're going to continue to build the trust that you have with your clients, with other people in your office, maybe with a more senior person, because that's really an important, maybe the most important thing, is having an attorney who is trustworthy, and can follow through on what they say they're going to follow through on. So I invite you to join in this discussion. You can leave me a voicemail by going to anchor.fm/attorneydsy and hit that message button. You can leave me a comment for me to play on the show or a question for me to answer. You can also leave me a comment or question on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at AttorneyDSY. I'm also on LinkedIn on my personal profile. So let me know if you have any comments about this episode. Tell me what you think about this podcast, or give me a topic you'd like to hear about. This podcast is on all the platforms for podcasts, so please be sure to subscribe and rate and review. I also want to invite you to the next session of the Lawyer's Emotional Intelligence Book Club. We're continuing on with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee's book, The Stress Solution. The next session will be Thursday. This was scheduling changed. June 4th at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. You can find out more at facebook.com/lawyerseq. Have a great day or night, and remember to fight for the lifestyle that you want and become the rainmaker that you need to be.